turn the pages of our lives into joining Senator Victor Ndoma to share the pages of his own life. Welcome, distinguished Senator, to Pages TV. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share the pages of my life and you share the pages of your life with a global audience. I know you did not drop from planet X, so I want to go into your childhood.
I was born in Ikom in Cross River State on the 8th of March 1956. And my mother tells me or told me that it was at 5:20 a.m. and that it was a Thursday.
You couldn't wait for the day to break.
I think I was in a bit of a hurry. Yes.
That's very nice.
Yes, to the then Emmanuel Takon Ndoma Egba, who was at the time a civil servant. He had been transitioning from teaching to the public service before he went to England to read law and became the very first lawyer from our part of the world. That is the old Ikom and old Ogoja, first practicing lawyer. Old Ikom, because I think before him there was Dr. M. Timbu. And my mother was Regina Achi Nentui, who also had a very interesting history. Amongst the first 4 Ikom women to receive Western education. And she became a missionary, Catholic missionary teacher, because it was her father who, as the paramount chief of Ikom, gave the Catholic Church the land where you have the initial Catholic institutions in Ikom. So in compensation, the Catholic Church asked for one of my grandfather's children to be given to the church, to be brought up in the ways of the church. And because the girl child in those days, in quote, had little value, my grandfather gave my mother instead of any of his sons. So she became one of the first 4 Ikom women to receive Western education. Incidentally, at the time I was born, she was a teacher, a Catholic missionary teacher, and also an elected councillor for the old Ikom County Council, which is now Ikom, Boki, and Etung local governments. So if at 1956 she was an elected councillor, that easily makes her the first female elected councillor in Nigeria. But in 1960 she was elected chairman of the old Ikom County Council.
I know your dad, one of the first lawyers, so you grew up to be a lawyer yourself. And then later in your life, you went into politics. So could it be like they would say the apple does not fall from the tree? Your mom, at that young age, when, even our area where we come from, people were not even educated, let alone go into politics at that young age. So do you think like history is repeating itself or repeated itself in you coming into governance?
Well, my friends joke that I took the legal side from my father and then the politics from my mother, because my father was essentially a legal professional.
You had both, a lawyer, a son, a politician.
I had to combine both.
Yes.
Yes, I had to combine both. But I think the political side of me was just in the DNA, because I just went into politics because I was attracted.
You never thought about that as a child, being from a family where your mom was a counselor. I didn't even know this part of the history. That's why things like this, programs like this, are very important for people to put history right. Just like somebody say a particular woman in a particular state was the first deputy governor. I know that's not true, because from Cross River State,
Cecilia Ekpenyong
is the first deputy governor. So people need to, if you don't tell your story, people rewrite their history. Yeah. So, so for me, I think maybe the politics came from there. But at any point in your lifetime, did you ever think, I'm going to go into politics? Or it just came naturally when you felt that Oh, no, no. Hey, hang on a minute. At 25, you were commissioner.
Not
How did that happen?
not 25. I was
Maybe
actually
more?
no. I was 3 months short of my 27th birthday.
Okay, I'm not too.
Yeah, so I was actually 26.
You must have been like the youngest commissioner in Nigeria at the time.
No, there were people before me. Dr. M. Timbu, I think, became minister at 24. Late Ken Sarowiwa became commissioner at 24. King Alfred Dieter Spieth, I think, was governor at 24. So there were trailblazers, you know. But for me, from our part of the world,
your age bracket, I would say at the time.
Yes.
You know, and then I think it was during a military administration.
Yes, it was during it. Coincidentally, President Muhammadu Buhari was then the military head of state.
I saw the pictures. We're going to get into the pictures at some point in this program to really see history in pictorial form.
Yes, yes, and then Akwa Ibom state was still part of Cross River. And curiously, every state in the country at the time had just 7 commissioners. There were 19 states.
So it was a very tight competition. Maybe stroke of luck.
It's another story by itself, but I think it was just
destiny. You call it?
Providence, because the person who became governor at the time, Navy Captain Edet Akpana Chibong.
He did not last.
He didn't last. He was governor for like 3 months.
Because I went to school with his children, I remember that.
Yes, he was governor for like 3 months. And then he had just assumed office. He had been in the Navy, and I think his postings took him out of the country more often than not. So he didn't know a lot of people back home. So when he came back home to become governor, he had identified people who could serve with him in his cabinet from the present Akwa Ibom state where he was from, because he was from Itam. And then 1 or 2 persons from Calabar. But his challenge was the Ugoja, the northern, central and northern part of the state. And he had to depend on somebody who was also like a big friend to me for advice. And the person told him, I will go to a young friend of mine. He will be very honest with me. He will give me names. But if I had my way, I would have nominated him. But he had 2 problems. The first is that he's not likely to be interested. The gentleman's name was Gregory Edem Ndoma, who was a relation of the governor, but he was a middle-level civil servant. He was a lance officer on level 12.
Was he the one giving these recommendations to the governor now?
The governor asked him for names, and then he came to me, and I gave him 12 names.
But at the time you were practicing law in Calabar?
At the time I had just moved into Calabar from Ugoja. You know, I started my practice in Ugoja with Kanu Agabi, and then 2 years later moved to Calabar.
We're trying to put history in right perspective here. I remember then, though I was young, they were saying that, they gave Kanu Agabi to be a commissioner. I don't know whether he had that. And then Kanu now said, no, he doesn't want to be a commissioner. Let Victor go. How true is that?
No, that's not the story. The story is the first commissioner that was announced was Kanu Agabi as Attorney General. You know, and if you remember, the military had just overthrown the government of President Shehu Shagari.
Yes.
Okay. So even though Kanu Agabi had resigned as commissioner, he was a commissioner under Dr. Clement Isong, but he resigned as commissioner for finance, I think in 1980 or 1981. The military came in December, I think 31st December 1983. So even though he had long left office, when they were inviting former political office holders, he too was invited. And he was, in quote, in detention. with other former political office holders. So he was in detention when he was announced as Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice. A few days later was when Mr. Ndoma came back to me because I had given him 12 names. I don't want to mention the names of the people I gave because they are all very prominent people today. Some have since become governors. And Mr. Ndoma drove out and then came back very excited. Mr. Ndoma was old enough to be my father, but we were very, very close friends. So he came back very excited and said, Victor, you have made me rich today. I said, how do you mean? And he said he had a bet with the governor because he told him, I have a young friend I'm going to, but he will not, I can swear that Victor will not put his name. And the governor said, look, if you get the list from Victor and his name is not there, I will give you 500 naira.
It was a lot of money at the time.
Which was plenty of money. A brand new car was 2,000 naira at the time. And even if he were 16 years old, I would appoint him. So Ndoma came back excited. Oh, look, you've made me rich. This was the deal I had with the governor.
Because your name was not there.
My name wasn't amongst the 12 names. So he came, I traveled to Goja the next day to do a matter for a friend. So we traveled together. When I came back, they said Mr. Ndoma had been to my house like 4 times, that it was urgent. And my younger brother, Roy, had told him that Victor will be home for the network news at 9 p.m., that he doesn't miss news. So Mr. Ndoma came back and said, the governor said he should come and tell me that he was appointing me and that he was giving me the privilege of choosing my ministry. And I said, Mr. Ndoma, go and tell that governor that I'm not interested in being commissioner. I'm interested in being governor someday. But if he vacates his seat for me today, I will gladly take it.
Did you say that as humor or you were serious?
Both. So he went back to the governor and then came back around 1 a.m. to say the governor said you must be a rude, badly brought up young man. So he was going to teach you a lesson. The next day, I was to travel out of the country. And we were on our way to the airport when I realized that we forgot my briefcase in the office. So I drove to the office to pick my briefcase. And my radio was on. My radio is, I hardly play music in the car or in the office. If you check the television, it's on news channels permanently. In the car, it is the radio permanently because I'm a news freak, I'm a news addict. I want to know what is happening by the minute. So my radio was on. They had just finished the 4 o'clock news and they were going back to the highlights. When my phone rang, we didn't have mobile phones then, it was landlines. It was Clement Ebri who later on became governor. He said, oh boy, where are you? I said, I'm in the office. He said, put on your radio. I said, it's on. He said, listen to the news. And of course, the highlight, 7 new commissioners have been appointed for Cross River State, blah, blah, blah. Victor Ndoma, Egba, Commissioner for Works and Transport. What?
Were you not shocked when you heard that?
No, because of my interaction with Mr. Ndoma the other way, I was a bit indifferent, nonchalant to it. But Works and Transport.
That was a very big ministry at the time.
Whoa.
And it still is.
Now, Clement now advised. We have always believed that Clement was well connected with the security agencies. And his next question, are you still traveling? I said, yes. I said, look, don't bother. So I said, why? I said, no, my brother, don't bother. Just wait a bit. Anyway, truly, I got to the airport. And they called me aside. Sorry, you can't travel. And
you feel like security check.
Yeah. So I got back home, first shock. Somebody who had left for work that morning, unannounced, anonymous more or less. There was this big crowd already jubilating on my behalf in my house. So that was my first contact with the Nigerian public political scene, But it was a very, very interesting time, because
then? You were not prepared for it.
No. I was, because I came,
From a family.
let me put it this way. Even though I saw the Civil War, but from the day I entered primary school to the day I qualified as a lawyer, I did not lose one day of school in spite of the Civil War. In spite of the Civil War. And don't forget that at the time my mother was a teacher. So I had started going to school with my mother, even though I was not eligible for school then, because then you had to do this.
You had to put your hand
across. Yes. And they wouldn't waive that even for. In fact, at the point I started, my mother was acting headmistress of the school. So I used to follow her to school, but I used to sit far behind. But I was following the lesson. So by the time I started school, I was far ahead with,
you had that knowledge
before
like revision, when you revision.
Precisely. So I didn't lose any day of school. So by the time I came back from youth corps, I was barely 22. This is in an environment where our early graduates were in their 30s and 40s. So to see a 22-year-old claiming to be a lawyer,
being called to bar already.
Called to bar, finished youth corps, and given my physique, this little man certainly can't be
who he is.
Yes. So I made up my mind that I was going to project an air of seriousness.
To be taken serious.
To be taken seriously. So from day one, I knew that I had to be taken seriously. And don't forget that my father, who later on became Justice Ndoma Egba, of the court, retired from the Court of Appeal, was the first resident lawyer in Ogoja. Before the Civil War, there was no lawyer resident in Ogoja. If you had a case, you had to go to Abakaliki or Enugu or Onitsha to get a lawyer. So he was the first resident lawyer. And as you know, he became more like a legend in our part of the...
Growing up, I thought, anyone who was a justice was Ndoma
In fact, I remember going to court in Obudu, and I had to go to one of those villages to see my client. And children were playing football, and I was hearing Lawyer Egba pass the ball, Lawyer Egba pass the ball, And I hear that in those days, if a child showed exceptional brilliance or was argumentative, they just called him Lawyer Egba,
Okay.
So because of the reputation my father had left behind, and by this time my mother was also in Ogoja. She had left politics. She was now in the public service and had been sent to establish the first remand home in Ogoja. So these were well-known people in society. So you just couldn't live a careless life. So what did I do? I was working with Kanu Agabi, and Kanu had this high reputation from day one of an ascetic, austere, hardworking person. But when I joined him, he was chairman of Nikon Insurance, and they were arranging to build the present Transcorp Hotel in Abuja.
Because Nikon,
yes. Before he became Transcorp, and he was in the United States. So I came to start practice without guidance. In fact, I was being taught by his law clerks. It was his clerks, one in Bado, and his name just escaped me. I remember it. One Sam. We used to call him Sat Sam. His proficiency on typing was legendary, and he had fingers that were like this. Sam Emore was his name. So it was clerks that were putting me through what to do, and I had to go to court in the absence of. Yes, on the first and only law firm I worked in. Yes, So Kanu had established this reputation of being disciplined. So I had to just key into that. So what I used to do is leave for the chambers at about 7 a.m. It take maybe an hour between 2 and 3, depending on whether I was in court or not, back to the house to eat something, and go back to the chambers and stay till 10.
Yes. About, going to the chambers that early, I think, am I right to say that that has kind of molded you? Because I mean, you gave me 10:30 to come for this interview we're doing right now. Honestly, I wasn't sure you're going to be here. I was just hoping to meet the time because it was raining and you were here. So could that say that, that discipline?
Well, I think it's a discipline I got from home and growing up. Don't forget that in our time, the distractions were very few. We didn't have television. Even radio, you had to go to a rich man's house to go and.
From a privilege, I'm sure.
That is the major contradiction of my life. That is a major contradiction. People say I was born with a silver spoon.
You mean you're the Ajebota of that time?
No. I wasn't born with a spoon, whether wooden or plastic of any kind. The society was a transitional society. So even though my parents...
They were it at the time.
They were...
Every standard and every...
They were indeed. But let me put it in context. I describe them as a transitional generation. I am perhaps the very first from my part of the world. Perhaps, I'm not sure, to have had an educated father and an educated mother.
Not only educated mother, an educated mother that was into politics at the time.
That was liberated. Okay, all right. Now, but let me give you the circumstances. My mother, even as chairman of council, lived with her mother in a compound. And in the compound, we had all sorts of people, businessmen, artisans, and you shared toilet facilities. But she was chairman of council.
So it was like knowing the person next door who became a leader. But these days, you can't find that.
No, you can't. You can't.
I can't say I'm the chairman of a local government.
And you are living with...
a compound with my parents.
Yes.
When I can embezzle the money and do whatever.
Precisely. And then she went to farm. We all went to farm. You come back from farm, you go to fetch water from the stream. The first pipe-borne water system was built by her as council chairman. And I remember the argument my elder brother and her had why the stand pump was not by our compound.
So she kept it for the public.
She took it to where the population was highest. And I remember her answer that I was not elected to come and serve my children. So she lived in a compound. Now, my father was practicing in Enugu and would come home now and then. His car never took me to school. Not for once. I walked with other children to school, and from school you went to farm. From farm you went to fetch water. From fetching water you did your homework. There was no electricity. You used the bush lamp to do your assignment. And by 4 a.m. you had to be awake because I was a mass server. And in the choir I had to go for mass. And then you had to be amongst the first to be in school because I was the bell boy.
Really,
So for me today, and I tell people, if you come to me for help, and I said, Lavonne, come at 10, and you are here 2 minutes after 10, you have lost me. If you give me an appointment and say, Victor, let's meet at so-and-so place at so-and-so time, if I'm not sure of the address, I send my people ahead of me, go locate this place. And 5 minutes to the time, I'll be in my car waiting by the venue. Because at a certain level, you are no longer selling knowledge. Every lawyer of a certain standing has the same level of knowledge. So what you are selling at a certain level is your time. Because there's so much demand on you that you begin to sell your time.
Because the time is not there.
It's not there. Precisely. So for me, time has been the most essential commodity. And if you see me, as I wake up in the morning, after my prayers, I'm sitting down with my diary in front of me, trying to jot down what I have to do for the day. And before I shut down for the day, I bring out that list and begin to cross-check what have you achieved. If you have achieved all, very well. If you haven't achieved all, what are you likely to carry forward? So I come each day with my time, barring any emergency, already audited. And at the end of the day, I have to account for it.
So now, distinguished senator, Yeah, education. Are we going to, you came from parents that were already educated, and you mentioned you were following your mom to school, even though you were not of age to go to school. So when we came of age to go to school, what were the schools you went to, and what age did you go to those schools? Let's take the interview from that.
Well, I have mentioned here that my mother was, because she was brought up by the missionaries, she became a missionary teacher. And by the way, she was the first parish council secretary of the Ecom parish of the Catholic Church.
Yeah, that's the Holy Family.
Holy Family Parish. So if you go to the
Because I know she still went there because my mom and I used to go to that parish.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. So at the time I was born, at the time I was eligible for school, which was like just before I turned 6. She was teaching in St. Martin's Primary School, which was the first Catholic primary school in our part of the world. And like I told you, at the time I even came in, she was acting headmistress. Yeah. So I started from St. Martin's and then finished in 1967, in the heat of the Civil War. I remember we were writing our exams and bullets were...
You are hearing a bullet.
Bullets, sometimes bullets, and you duck, and then you
keep... in St. Martin's?
In St. Martin's, yes. St. Martin's is on a hill. And from that hill, you see the Cross River very, very clearly and beyond. And the Nigerian troops had pushed the Biafran troops across the river. So the Biafrans were... The war started, the first bullets was in a town or a village called Gakim, which is in today's Bekwara local government. It's at the border between Benue and Cross River. It is actually at the border between northern Nigeria and southern Nigeria.
So Gakim was the war front.
The very first bullet was fired there. And I think about the same time, it also started around somewhere in Suka. I can't remember whether it's Ogbula for, but somewhere around Suka. But if you draw a straight line to Suka, that was the boundary between northern Nigeria and southern Nigeria. So Obudu was liberated first, and then Ugoja, and then they now moved into Ecom, the federal troops led by, he became Colonel Swantong. And then, yes, and then Colonel Bowman Kachim, who is still alive. I remember him very, very well because as a child, I used to go and sell them more at the war front. Okay. It's another story. And then I think around the same time, General Muhammadu Buhari also had moved from Obudu to Goja to Ecom. I think then it was...
You didn't meet General Buhari at that time?
I did.
At that young age?
Yes, I did.
And history repeated itself again. We're going to go into the pictures at some point in this interview. Wow. I
did. And then Colonel Shua, who my family remains very fond of and remains eternally grateful to.
Is he still alive?
He was killed by Boko Haram just before his 80th birthday in Maiduguri. Oh. He's somebody who survived the civil war, only to be enjoying his retirement he was sitting outside under a tree and they just came and shot him. So from St. Martin's, I sat for the entrance to Merinol College. Merinol College was then the most prominent Catholic school in that part of the world. And very prestigious. And if you see the alumnus of Merinol, yes, so. But for me, my choice of Merinol was actually because it was a holding ground for those who aspired to the priesthood. And by this time, my aspiration had become for the priesthood because my whole life was housed around the church. So if anybody told me that I wasn't going to be a priest, I would have found it very funny. And then in 1965, There were two major events that I recall. The first was the ordination of Joseph Edra Ukpo as the first Ogoja bishop. Then Ogoja was Ogoja and President Abakaliki Afikpo. You know, so he was the first priest.
Was it a priest or a bishop?
He was a priest. He had just been ordained the first priest. And then he came to St. Martin's to talk, to see the school. You know, St. Martin's was a mission school. And fortuitously, he sat on my desk. So I remember fondling with his soutane. So for me, that was the ultimate confirmation that this my priesthood is sealed. Yes. Yes. You know, sit on my desk to address the students. You know, and then the second major thing, of course, was the Malaysians coming to pick fruits. Yes, and we were told that this is what they came for, you know.
So did they come to Southeastern State at the time?
They came to Ikom.
Because okay, so the palm fruit that the Malaysians took to Malaysia was from Ikom itself.
Well, I don't.
We hear stories that they came to Nigeria.
Well, the truth of the matter is that I saw them in Ikom. They came to my school. Yes. But where they picked the fruits from, but we were told they came to pick palm fruits. That was what we were told.
Goes around,
yes.
They pick palm fruit from Nigeria, and they're doing better than Nigeria.
Precisely. You know. So I now sat for the entrance to Merino, which, like I said, was because of this aspiration to be a priest. And I remember the day of the entrance. I think our vigilator was an Indian teacher from Merino. And when I finished, he was like, "What's happening here?" So just then we had this fearsome headmaster, Mr. K.E. Bassi.
Well respected.
Oh, he broke no nonsense, and corporal punishment for him was an assignment he had to deliver personally. He didn't have. No. He had to do it personally.
To make sure it's well carried out.
Yes, and he did it with such aplomb. I remember how the cane would just go. If you say 12,
were you wearing shorts?
No, I never became. I was never punished. Right, yeah. You know, and interestingly, throughout my primary school and my secondary school, I don't remember an infraction that earned me a punishment. Never. You know. Anyway, so the vigilator went out to talk with the headmaster, who was just walking by to see how we were faring, and I said, "Oh my God, I'm in trouble today." And then when everybody had finished, he said I needed to see her parents. Of course, it was only my mother who was in.
At the time, I think it was very, it was quite difficult to get admission into such schools. It was based on.
It was very competitive.
Competitive and merit.
Yeah, it was very, very.
Did you know anybody?
No. So I took him to see my mother, and he said that your son did very well. So I was relieved, but that I thought he was going to be careless because he finished too early. But when I went through the paper,
you knew everything.
Yes. So anyway, we now went for the interview. Then you had to do a written entrance, and then the oral stroke, another written interview. And this time we had to go to Goja. And I remember it was three of us, Daniel Ewona from Obubra, but they were living in Ikom, Michael Obot from Akwa Ibom, but they were living in Ikom. Michael retired some years back as Deputy Controller General of, is it Customs or Immigration? And then myself. And then we had to after dinner, they threw mattresses in the school refectory for those of us who came from our entrance. Yes, and I remember the three of us from Ikom shared the mattress, and that was the first time I was seeing a television in my life.
Because it was a missionary school.
It was a missionary school, so and it was the day for them to put on the television for 1 hour and
for the students
to watch. And I remember we watched a movie, and I remember one of the actors, Sammy Davis.
Sammy Davis.
I remember him. Yeah. You know. So The next morning was the entrance. Oh, there was a gentleman, very tall, Kevin Akunjam, who came. Yes, he became a big politician and my mentor. You know, who came, introduced himself to the Ecom students and said he told.
Was he a student there?
He was a student, but he's a very senior student. If we had any problems, he took us to his corner, you know.
But was it only people from Ecom that came, or from other parts of the
from all over? But you know, the Merino had a huge population of students from the today's southeast.
Southeast, yeah.
Huge. Onovo Ogbonna, the former Inspector General of Police. I met him in Merino.
Bayo Joe went to Merino.
No, not Bayo. Bayo was in Zaria, St. Paul's, Zaria.
He went to that police here. What boy?
No. But we have Martin Elechi, the former governor of Ebonyi. Yeah, he's an old boy. Yes, Archbishop Ukbo is an old boy. Kanu Agabi. I mean, our alumni is impressive. It's very impressive. Anyway, it was while we were writing the interview, the orals and the written interview, that Ojukwu announced Biafra.
Okay. Because it was in the
middle of that tension, yes. You know, that tension that resulted in. So I think it was 29th May or something. I can't remember. So we were in the middle of that when Ojukwu announced. So there was sudden tension. People were jubilating, but you could, the jubilation notwithstanding, you could sense the unease, the tension, and even us as children, we knew that there was a big problem. So Kevin Akunjam showed up. He rided the three of us to the road, found a lorry that was going to Ecom, put us into the lorry to go back to Ecom, you know. And then, of course, I passed the entrance. The interview, now going to Merino was another wahala. The civil war was still going on around the Ecom axis, the Edo, Nkarasi.
It wouldn't have been safe for any parent to send their children at that time to school, would it?
Well, you know, my family believes that there's no price too high to pay to get education.
Even in the midst of war?
So I had to go to Merino, and guess how we traveled? From Ecom, you had to go to Obudu. And the road wasn't tarred. We left Ecom at 6 a.m. We got
like that from Four Corners, you know, the Obudu Road. Is that where
you go to further? No. You go to Bendege.
Okay.
And then from Bendege to Abontakon.
Okay, Abontakon.
And then to Wula and those places until you got to Obudu. The road wasn't tarred, and there were only two means of transportation in those days: lorries, Ministry of Works tippers. The Ministry of Works had leyland tippers. Yeah. You know, and I remember the day I was leaving.
Which one did you take, tipper or lorry?
A lorry. The lorry had a lot of Merino students inside, including Njan Kanaban. Nja was, it's a prince of Ecom, but with a massive build. You know, so I was about the last to board, and you see a small child trying to navigate the tailboard when the Biafrans dropped a mortar shell not far, and it killed the daughter of the richest commander, Obajioga, you know, just not far from us. So my mother came. I was halfway up the vehicle, and my mother was a very smallish woman. My mother was the size of a Fanta bottle, but had toughness of three lionesses put together. So there was my mother struggling to pull me down from the tailboard of the lorry. And Judge just came and yanked me up into the lorry and shouted to her in Ecom language, if anything happens to this child, hold me responsible. And then from the old motor park in Ecom, you had to go up the hill to where you have the Catholic church, and it was untarred. So That
Ikon Road is quite red and slippery.
red. And that short distance that is today like half a minute used to take hours. So as we were trying to navigate the hill, the more you went up the hill, the clearer you were to the Biafrans on the other side. So they started firing mortar shells, but they were missing until we climbed the hill. It was a very dangerous journey. And then we now got to Budu. All we had to eat inside the lorry was banana and walnuts. We got to Budu. It was Hamatan. It was January 1968. School resumed, I think, 18th January 1968. So this must have been like 17th. Yeah, 17th January 68. We got to Budu. We were famished.
You would be, because one, the road is bad, and with those kind of vehicles that they are carrying.
We left Ikom around between 6 and 7 a.m. We got to Budu just before midnight. And then I now remember that my father had a client, an Obudu woman, big Obudu woman, and big side, but very kind. And her name was Lydia, Madam Lydia Abushe. So I just mentioned to one of the hands in the motor park that, come on, do you know a madam?
We got to the motor park in the night.
We had to sleep at the park.
Like sleep there because you had to go to the next day.
I'm coming to the story will be, you find it very interesting. So I saw this motor park hand and I said to him, do you know Madam Lydia Bush? He said, oh, it's her shop here. She was selling food right in the motor park. So I went and knocked. So who is that? I say, Lawyer Egba speaking. She started singing right from inside. Whoa, 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 whoa. And then waddled out. I was all covered by Hamatan dust. In fact, I was nicknamed Hamatan inside the lorry. And I was the smallest and the youngest. So she now said, wait, what are you doing here this night? I said, we're on our way to Ugoja. He said, how many of you? I said, we're plenty. We're many. He said, well, they go and call everybody. So I think they left over food, very hot, pounded yam. We ate. Oh my God, I remember the relish with which we ate this food.
Did they give you more portion because you knew the woman?
I'm not much of an eater, but I became the hero, even though I was the smallest. I became the hero
of saving them
that night. So very early we now left to Vandikia in Benue State.
Isn't it the road goes like that? There was no straight road from there straight to
Civil War. So the drivers were avoiding, and even where the Civil War had ended, because there were mines that hadn't been cleared, it was dangerous for you to take those roads. So we went to Vandikia, from Vandikia to Gabu. Then from Gabu we now started coming down to Okuku. And then we were discharged at the Okuku market. Remember, Okuku market was then famous. It was a big market and famous for yams and all of that, you know. And then from Okuku, I now carried my metal box on my head, did about 3 or 4 kilometers to the school.
Well, you know, as a child, then you didn't really see the inconvenience that most children now would never do that.
One effect of a war, and that is why when I hear children calling for war, I just laugh. One effect of a war is that there are no children. They become adults overnight. Yes. There is no child in a war situation. Everybody you see as a child is an adult. Because those children, put them in another situation, they can kill. They can manipulate weapons if you put them in another situation. So the war situation makes you an adult overnight, you know. So I now got to Merinol, and at the gate, there was this very smallish student who said, we had heard of the tradition of Merinol before we got there. Kneel down. So I knelt down. Walk.
That one is, like...
We call it tossing.
Okay.
what they now,
Welcoming you.
yes, what they now call bullying, but then we called it tossing with my metal box. Then at a point, he said I should stand up, so I stood up. So I thought I had my first enemy. But it would turn out to be a very interesting story. So I went to the principal's office. I had my uniforms. They issued me a place, a dormitory. I went, I was assigned a bed. And guess who my neighbor was?
No.
The same young man who asked me to kneel down.
Oh my goodness. Was he a class ahead of you?
Well, he was
maybe 2 classes ahead
just one class ahead of me. And guess who he was? Guess.
I can't think of.
Reverend Father Cyril Bayim.
He went ahead to be a priest.
He went, in fact, today, Father Bayim has been in New York. He couldn't attend my mother's burial because of ill health.
Yeah.
But on the first anniversary, Father Bayim came all the way from New York to say Mass in Nicom.
That's so sweet.
Yeah. We have remained very, very close. And each time we meet in public, I repeat this story,
It's really, really so interesting.
So that was it for Merino. When, what happened? Of course, a highly regulated environment. You wake up at this time, go to fetch water.
That's quite appropriate for coming from a Catholic school.
Yes.
Now, from Merino, you went to what university?
I went to University of Lagos. First of all, to University of Nigeria and Nsukka,
Okay.
Enugu campus. And I tell you the circumstances. The year before, they changed the school year in 1973. It used to be January to December. So they now in 1973, they changed from September to June. So I had to do 2 classes in 1973. But while I was in lower 6, we went to sit for the entrance to University of Nigeria. University of Lagos had no entrance because they only took you based on A levels.
Okay.
It was University of Nigeria that took you on school sets.
Because I think at the time, most people, when they finish secondary school, they go to do upper 6 or whatever it's called, A levels, before nobody went to school direct from secondary school.
No, when University of Nigeria, after the Civil War, University of Nigeria made it possible for you to, and that was why quite a number of our higher school students in Merino in 1971, 72, 73 left for the university. Oh, by the way, I met Dr. Bonayonu also in Merino.
Okay, from Merino, you met him there.
Yes.
He went to Nsukka?
No, he went to Unilag.
Okay,
and
then again in Unilag.
He was just leaving when we came in. In fact, 2 of them from Merino made the 2 first class in chemical engineering.
Wow, Unilag.
In Unilag. And then there was this lady, I forget his name, who also had a first class in accounting. So you could go to University of Nigeria, but you had to do an entrance examination. So we went for that entrance examination. And it was Paul Erokoro and I who applied for law. Paul was 1 year behind me in Merino.
He is also a son.
Yes, he's also a son. And we all started with Kadma Gabi. But Paul was taken. I wasn't taken.
That's in Nsukka?
In Nsukka, in 73. So I had to go back. In fact, that year, curiously, only 2 students from Merino that used to, a whole class will go to Nsukka. That year, only 2 students were taken. Paul Erokoro for Enugu campus and John Owen for the main campus. John went to read agri-economics and Paul was reading law. So the following year, 1974, after I had finished A levels, I now applied to a number of universities, Ibadan to read history, Unilag to read law, ABU to read law. Then there were only 4 universities that offered law in the country. And then I sat for the entrance again to Enugu campus. And before I passed this time. So I went to Enugu while waiting for the A-level results to come out. So I was in Enugu for 30 days.
30 days?
Yes, 30 days. And then I was coming home for the weekend. So I passed through Itigidi to see my friend Mark Egba, who retired as an ambassador not too long ago. And Mark's father was the area engineer for Ministry of Works in Ogoja. He was building the Ogoja Road at the time, and my mother was still in Ogoja. And I met Mark, and he said he was on his way to Ogoja. Why don't you go to Ogoja? So we went to Ogoja. Then the next day we bought newspapers, Daily Times. They had published Unilag admission. Well, first we went to Merinol to get our results, and we did very well. And then the next day we bought newspapers and see Unilag admission. Mark had been admitted to read mass communication. The late Otabio one had been admitted to read mass communication. David Ayak had been admitted to read mass communication, and Victor Ndoma name was nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, Mark had just 1 point better than my result. So I had a good result, but his was slightly better.
But did you have time to read law, or just the university just took it upon themselves to allot
a
department?
No, you apply for a course, and we didn't have JAMB, so the universities did direct admission. So we had to go to see Mark's father. Somewhere on the Ogoja Obudu Road, Chief Lino Sokom's village. That was where his camp was. You know, so Mark told him he had just got admission. When are you leaving? So he went inside, brought some money, gave Mark for his school fees, you know. And then we were still standing there looking at him. So what's the problem? So now Mark now said, his friend here, Victor, his name didn't come out. He would like for me to follow him to Lagos to find out why he's done. So he went inside again, brought some money.
Very kind man.
Yeah, he was a very kind man, very, very kind man. So that was how we went to Lagos. And then got into Lagos. My first time in a big town. Before now, I was in the biggest town I'd seen was Enugu. And I remember while I was in Enugu, I wrote to my elder brother, Professor Ndoma, Roland Ndoma. He was already reading medicine. No, he's still alive. So I wrote to him that I was now in Suka. And I remember his letter. You can't stay there. You can't go through university without passing through a township. You have to come to Lagos. So we went to Lagos, and then sorting out my admission became another thing. But then I saw the best of human beings and the worst of human beings.
Why was your name not in the admission list? That's what I'm
okay. Roland was in medical school. He was in Idi Araba. So I had to stay with him. And money was so tight that we walked from Idi Araba to Akoka on foot. And then he took me to the Faculty of Law.
Roland was a medical student?
He was a medical student.
At least he knew the environment before
He started from the main campus. No, he did prelim before going to... So he was quite familiar with the... So he took me to the Faculty of Law. And then we saw a door. I remember the names. E.E. Uviagara and A.O. Obilade. Those were the name plates on the door. E.E. Uviagara. And then another nameplate under it, A.O. Obilade. So we knocked. And they said, come in. So I saw two gentlemen. One was sitting, but the one sitting turned out to be Uviagara. They were all lecturers. And the one standing, a very smallish man, A.O. Obilade, was standing. Yes, what can we do for you? I said, sir, I applied to read law. My name didn't come out. He said, can we see your papers? This was Obilade asking us. So I gave him the papers. So he looked at the papers and he turned to Uviagara. That was how I got to know Uviagara's first name. Egerton. We certainly have a problem here. We have admitted people with far less qualifications than this. So how come this young man is not an...
Don't marry. You need to know people.
In fact, I retell the story of Obilade about what Nigeria could be. This is a university lecturer. I was from the rural settings of Ugoja and Nikon. I wasn't Yoruba. I didn't speak Yoruba. I wasn't even a student. This was a young man looking for admission. Obilade left his table and took me by hand. In fact, when he was taking me, Roland said to me, "From here, you're your own." Mm-hmm. Obilade took me by hand to the admissions office and to say, "Gentlemen, there's a problem with this young man." And he handed me over to a gentleman. I have tried to remember that gentleman's name because I'm very good with names and dates. But I haven't. So the man said, "Oh, sir, I will sort him out. I'll sort him out." 1 week passed. So we had one Ode, Mr. Ode, who was a librarian. He worked in the Faculty of Law Library, which was some massive place. He was a typist. Ode grew up in Ikom and spoke Ikom language very fluently. So Roland had introduced me to Ode. So I went and told Ode, "This is what Obilade had done for me." So Ode now came with me to the admissions office. And the gentleman was his friend. 2 weeks passed. By this time I was completely out of money.
Because your friends were already in school.
They had registered, they were attending lectures, Then 3 weeks. So inside me, I just said, the moment is 4 weeks, I will go back to Mr. Obilade, who is the famous Professor Obilade today, who wrote Introduction to Nigerian Law.
I think I did that course in my
and I'm sure you read his book.
Yes, I did that. I've done one of those courses. I think at that course of second year. I can't remember.
Okay. And Viagara also became a famous professor of labor law. And when I was a senator, he was a consultant to many of the committees in the Senate, and I had to work with my teacher. Oh, he remembered. I mean, I never stopped. Each time he appeared, I'll say,
you have to be very careful who you meet. Even you say a young person will
you
don't know tomorrow.
Yeah.
So in their own imagination, I'm sure they never imagined. They may have, but to think that you're going to meet again when you were a senator and you met him when you were looking for admission, that they are coming to do consultancy work when you were a senator. The world certainly goes round.
It does. Anyway, so I made up my mind that the moment is 4 weeks, I was going to go back to Obilade. So I went to Obilade again. Oh, by the way, Ode even took me to see this gentleman in his house in Abule Ijesha.
That's the Obilade man?
No, the man in the admissions office.
Yes.
And then when we came out, Ode now told me that the man said I should look for money for him.
Even at that time, they were taking bribes? Hiddenly?
My dear sister, I was shocked. So here we were with an Obilade, one extreme of integrity.
And then
the same university, admissions officer looking for money. So I told Ode that I didn't have any money to give him. And in fact, at that point, I had completely run out of money. So I was now, because Akoka, if you know Lagos, Akoka to Idi Araba is not a joke. So I now started sleeping in a lecture room, Faculty of Law lecture room.
Is it when you were looking for admission?
I was still looking for admission.
So when you go to wait for the admission officers or whatever, and it's night because you didn't have transport money to go, but
I just hang around, and then occasionally Ode will give me 1 naira, 2 naira to go and eat. So I started sleeping in the admissions office. So when it was 4 weeks, I went to Obilade. So he said no. So he took me back there. From there, he said I should wait for him. He went to the Vice Chancellor's office and then came out with my admission letter.
Wow, he really did a lot for you.
He did a lot for me without knowing me, without knowing where I came from. I was nobody. This was a big man, And each time, I remember Obilade is with so much emotion.
Yeah, because he gave you the admission
beyond that, he represented what Nigeria could be.
You don't need to know anybody.
You don't need to know anybody. He represented what Nigeria could be. Anyway, so I now, after that, of course, I could start lectures. He told me if I had any academic problems, I should come to him. He was always available. And in any case, he was also my teacher. But guess what? First day at lecture, disaster.
What year was this?
1974.
1974.
First day at lecture, disaster, and a pleasant surprise. I told you I was sleeping in the lecture room. So my small possessions, my toothbrush, my underwear were in a drawer. And that was my first day at lecture. So before I could come to sit there to protect my possessions.
Wait. Where you keep your property, your toiletries or whatever, that was the lecture room you
mentioned? It was a lecture room, and it had a drawer. The desk had drawers. So I was hoping to go and colonize this so I can protect.
You can protect your property.
But before I could, a classmate of mine, and I remember her name very well, Yetunde Shebioba, sat on it.
So now you were sitting in this class, you entered the lecture room trying to get access to the particular desk where you hid your things because you're sleeping in the lecture room. And then another student took over your seat. Yeah,
and then of course brought out. But I just kept it.
What color of the underwear was it?
It was what you call polo.
Polo is a.
Polo was what kind of material was it? Like more like nylon.
What, it had multicolors? Or
yes, of course, multicolored. But I kept it.
Is it what they call boxer shorts now? So.
No. Polo has no equivalent.
And people that are watching this interview now, when they
will. Because of my age, will know what you know. It has no equivalent today. Anyway, I kept a straight face. But after lectures.
But did she drop it or she put it back?
No, she put it back. Okay. She put it back. She just amused the class and put it back. After lectures, I now went to complete the registration formalities. And there I was, and then I heard somebody say in a Tung language, who is this who looks exactly like it's in Ndoma? So I turned. And he said, what's your name? I said, Victor Ndoma. He said, oh, you repeated in a Tung. No wonder. What are you doing here? I said, I've just been admitted to read what he said, law. At your age?
You were really young.
Yes. He was, his name, this was Godwin Ofuka. He was an in-service student. He was already working. He was a big man in the Ministry of Information. So they came for further training. We had quite a number of them like that came from the then Cross River State. So he asked me where I was staying. So I told him I was sleeping in the lecture room. So he said, no, go and pack your things. He gave me his room number, El Academy, that I should come there. So that's why I started squatting.
Squatting was very, very popular.
It was.
Someone is given accommodation and that, but we have like 10 people squatting.
Yeah, no, but we had just one. They had just one because, and then that evening, I was still trying to figure out myself. And this very young, handsome boy knocked. So I opened. And he said it was you I was looking for.
Was looking for who?
For me. I said, you're looking for me.
But you didn't know the person?
No. He said, my name is Christopher Ojo. I'm in your class. I realize you are new. You must be behind time with your notes. I've come to offer you my notes so that you can copy. So I said, oh, thank you very much. I was just trying to figure out what to do. So I took the notes, and then as I was seeing him off, he said, you had the underwear in the class. don't lie to me.
But how did he know that? Or maybe
Guess.
I think they used that classroom, and you were the newest face there.
I was the newest face. So they just did one plus one. Guess who Christopher Ojo is? Bayo Ojo.
Is that Bayo? Oh my goodness.
So that was how.
Former minister.
Yes, that was how I met.
So you could have known each other even before you became a minister from all
Jesus
the way back
Christ.
from school.
From year one.
Oh my goodness.
I was his best man when he got married.
Oh.
We were all living in this house here when he became minister.
Oh, yes, when you
Yes. You know. So that was how I met Bayo, and I was able to catch up. And Bayo was now helping me through. And then we now became family. Bayo, myself, through me, Bayo got to meet Mark, because Mark was my classmate in Merino. Mark Egba, that's the one whose father gave me the money. And then Teddy Were, the publisher of independent newspaper. Yes. That's how we now became a quartet. Yes. And we started moving together. And then, you know, the good thing about Unilag, apart from what I've said, is that when my admission letter eventually came, it came with a timetable. It came with the courses available. You could choose whatever you wanted to. Yes, electives. And then it came with the exam timetable up to your final year. So from day one, I knew when I was going to graduate. When I graduated on that day, there wasn't a strike, there wasn't a single strike. And then, of course, from there was only one school in Nigeria. We went to the law school, which was Victoria Island. I would have remained an anonymous student, if not for a certain misadventure.
And what can you share that with us?
The lecture room was like a cinema theater, you know how a theater, and we had permanent seats. So I was sitting right at the back with the famous Colonel Bello Fadile, who was a young army officer. I was in the middle. Then Haruna Abubakar, who later on became deputy governor of, Plateau State, and then became, in 1999, he became the first deputy Senate president. And then on the other side, I think, was Paul Erokoro, and then Nani Lad and Olusegun Kuba on that row. So the chairman of the Council for Legal Education, Dr. Nabo Graham Douglas.
Nabo, yes, I know the student, I know the song.
Okay.
That's Twain's brother.
Yes.
The late minister's brother.
Okay, yeah, that's the late minister's brother. Very huge man. Himself and Rotimi Williams were the first to become SANs. The two of them, in Nigeria. So
at the time, sorry to digress a bit, it's not about Peter, but I'm trying to, you say SAN because I'm going to ask a question about that. Did the seal come from England then?
No, you had QC.
Okay, that QC is England.
Yes, it's in England. So Nigeria wanted its own indigenous honor. Yes, which is the SAN. So he came to address the class. And you know how misfortunes go. All of a sudden, I felt very pressed. And I had to use the toilet. So I told Fadile and Haruna, that's why I'm pressed. I want to go and use the toilet. He said, don't go. Just manage it. I said, no. Otherwise, yes, I'll pee here. So I sneaked out behind the back door. Dr. Graham Douglas had seen me. So, and he was a massive man, a man mountain.
Well, did he know that you were the son of...
No. So he said they should go and fetch me wherever I was. So they came, I was still peeing, and the security men said, cut the pee and follow us.
Oh my goodness. How are you going to do that?
So I said, no, look, I'm in trouble already. Let me discharge one. So I followed them. They took me straight to the front of the class. How dare you leave the class when I am addressing this class? I have in mind to send you out of this class. You don't qualify to be a lawyer.
But this actually the Council of Legal Education now, is it before you went to law school or the...
We're in law school now.
Before you graduated from law school?
We had just started. Usually in those days, the DG of the law school will come address you. The chairman of council will be there to address you. The body of benchers, chairman and body of benchers will... So this man threatened to expel me from law school.
You're just entering and then you're...
Hey, my dear sister, this pee that I had just emptied accumulated again.
Because of fear.
And see my size. This
I know
man
him.
was like 6'7".
I know him. I know him. The lawyer's father.
You know? So I was finished. The whole class was silent. Then I don't know what entered him. What is your name? So I said, Victor Ndoma Egba. So he kept quiet for a while. Don't tell me you are related to that fine judge called it Ndoma Egba. Ah, my dear sister, I had seen a window.
Yes, my God.
I said, unfortunately, is my father. What makes that fine gentleman being your father unfortunate? The conversation had changed.
So no more spelling there.
No, the conversation had changed. In any case, he now ended up by saying that he was going to call my father personally to report my misconduct. I got my reprieve. Then it was lunchtime. Especially the female student. Oh, boy, you don't tell us that we big man picking. We would have seen you differently.
I think in that wall of the legal,
yes.
He's so well. That is so well respected. And like it was their contemporaries.
Yes.
The Rotimi Williams, Graham Douglas. The Ndoma Egba. Those are names that we.
So that was how I escaped. Anyway, we now. There was no other major incident. We now did the exams, finished, and then, of course, the next major thing was NYSC posting. All my friends were either in Enugu, Ibadan, or Lagos. Walter Onogen, who became Justice Onogen, Lagos. Paul Erokoro, Lagos. Bayo Ojo, Enugu. Rotimi Akeredolu, Enugu. Then Victor Ndoma Egba, Bauchi. What?
Why?
Oh. Just then, I think the day before, Roland had left for then Gongola State. He was posted to Gongola. So he sent me.
He had finished medical school.
He had finished medical school and left about a month before I finished law school. So I had to go and stay with Colonel Pamoga, for those few weeks.
That became a governor?
Yes. So Roland sent me a letter that wherever I was posted to, I should accept it. I should make no effort to change it.
But at that time, was it possible to change your posting?
It was okay. Let me give you this story. Maybe it will tell you whether it was possible or not. I had a classmate called Sonny. His name was Sonny Godwin Campbell. Sonny schooled in England, and he was married to a young doctor in Louth. So they two were living in Louth. I was living with Roland in Louth, going to law school. Roland had a car, but he hadn't mastered driving, so I was using his car to law school. So when the car wasn't available, I met Sonny. I'll now go with Sonny. And it turned out that Sonny's father was the then director of finance for NYSC. So one of those evenings, we were coming back from school. Sonny said, let's stop over and see Daddy, somewhere in Surulere. So we went, he was having a glass of beer, we shared in his beer. And my son, where have you been posted to? And I said, Bauchi. That's some distance. Would you?
Some distance, considering that even the transportation.
It was some distance.
The roads were not really that good, and the air were not that good.
There was no airport. So he said, would you like to change it? I said, no, sir. So he nodded his head. So this is my boy. Go there, you'll meet your destiny there. I remember his words. You will find your destiny there. That was how he put it. Because he was a half caste. So I think his mother or father, because his name was Campbell. So,
they got to answer Campbell as well.
Well, they were Lagosians. And you have Campbell Street and all of those places. So that was how I left for Bauchi, for Youth Corps. And then the chief inspector, I got to know later, was the elder brother of the present governor of Bauchi State, Bala Mohammed. But it was in the Senate when I was telling the story of my days in Bauchi. that he told me that that man was his elder brother, same father, same mother. But the chief inspector referred me to his deputy, one Anuforo from Imo State. Tall man. So Anuforo said to me, you know, in those days, lawyers, doctors, and pharmacists went for youth call, I think a month or two before. So it was just us lawyers, pharmacists, and doctors. We didn't even go to, they would post you straight. And then later on, when the camp opened, so everybody will now come and join, orientation camp. You know, so he said that they were starting legal aid council. And then the police had also made a request for lawyers, or for a lawyer. So I said I was ready to take the two. He said, how can you be in two places at the same time? Yes. So I said I didn't want any idle time. That I wanted to use my youth corps period productively. And that I had come with certain books that I must finish during my youth corps period.
Reading them?
Reading them. One of them was War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. Then Roots had just come out by Alex Haley. So I said I needed to finish this book, so I just, you know. So he said, okay, if you want the two, why not? So he posted me to both. So I went to the Ministry of Justice first, Legal Aid Council. It was one Justice Ozo. He became a judge, then he was Mr. Ozo, an Igbo man, also very big. The Attorney General then was from Adamawa State or Gongola State. But in all, the entire ministry, at the level of lawyers, they had 9 people, including Attorney General, Solicitor General, the Director, DPP Director, all. So they showed me an office. But from the way the office was, you could tell that I wasn't going to be the only person in that office. You know, tables and all that. Eventually, my other lawyers came. Of course, all of them were my classmates. One became just retired as Chief Judge of, is it Ogun State or Osun State, one of those states. The other one became Secretary to Government of Katsina State, became Attorney General. The other one went to the House of Assembly in 1979, as soon as we finished with you know. And then, of course, one of the girls, they took them to the female hostel because we were in a male hostel. We called it Copper's Lodge, you know. And then I now went to report also after a few days to the police. I went to the Commissioner of Police, Alhaji Dan Madami. You know, he was the Commissioner of Police. He retired as DIG, very highly respected. Even in death till today, they still respect him. Then he referred me to the Assistant Commissioner in charge of CID. Guess who he was? Nuhu Aliyu.
Okay.
So if you heard Nuhu Aliyu, because I met him in the Senate, when he will say in the Senate, in this Senate I have my youth copper. then David Mark will say, name him. And he will be looking around because by that time I had become
very close to David Mark.
Yes, I had become the deputy leader and then leader, you know. So I did my youth call with, but Nuhu now handed me over to his deputy. One Bright Agbamu. Bright was a national athlete, national footballer in the 60s. But guess what? He was in Nikom during the Civil War as a policeman.
What a point, you are being connected.
Yes,
yes. Like knobs, computer knobs.
So when I went to see Bright, he was asking me after my uncle, the late Paramarula, my aunties.
Did you know him in Nikom at the time?
I knew him as one athletic-looking policeman, but I had no personal. You know, there were very few. You know.
You always know this person.
Yes. And then there was this drinking place not far from where our house, where military men and policemen went to drink. So I used to see him. You know. So I told him I knew him in Nikom and all of that. But he was living alone in a big house. So he said, look, this is your room. Any day you want to sleep here, you sleep.
They didn't give you accommodation?
We did. We had. In fact, I had several accommodations. A friend of mine who is professor in Nnamdi Azikiwe now, Jesse Orakwe, who also had a big house. You know, I had a room there. And he had a car. You know, and I had just come back from visiting the Ayambims in Germany, where I met a lot of young friends who wanted to, yes, to explore Africa. So all of them were coming. In fact, I had so many foreign visitors that they started calling me Vikito International, that my friends were international, not local.